Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to talk about episode 4 of Loki. So I'm going to start with the things I didn't like or found strange, and the biggest one is probably the fact that Loki is apparently in love with the female Loki. And I kind of found this whole idea kind of nasty because, as I discussed in previous reviews of this show, I had no problem at all with having a female version of Loki because, as I explained, with multiple timelines and multiple options, I think it's very logical that in some of the timelines, when two parents produce a child, maybe not the same sperm cell would impregnate the same egg, and so maybe the child that will be born roughly the same time and might even have the same name since the parents will give the same name, but it will be a genetic sibling of whoever is in the other timeline, meaning because different genes got spliced together, then the offspring might be a female or a male and might look different to the other timeline. So I had zero problem with this idea. This is something that I always said should have happened in many time travel movies and yet didn't, and so I have no problem with it actually being explained that way. But if that is the excuse for it, then that means that the female Loki is a genetic sibling of Loki. She's basically his sister. So him falling in love with her is kind of like incest. That's kind of nasty. Now, I know that Loki was adopted, so maybe they could have used that as an excuse. They could have simply said that this female Loki is actually the daughter of Odin and his wife, and so she's not an ice giant like our Loki. And so, if they had mentioned that, I would be fine with that. But yet, no one even mentions that. Like, Loki doesn't even question her about the details of her background. I complained about that in my review of the previous episode, which, by the way, I released as a shorts video, so maybe not all of you have seen it because I think it's only visible on cell phones. I'm not sure, so maybe some of you missed my previous review, so you can check it out. It's only 1 minute long. I thought about doing that for all the episodes, but there's too much to talk about to compress it into 1 minute, so that's why I'm making a normal video. So anyway, if they had established that she's not a genetic sibling, that she's not adopted or adopted from a different place, she would have no genetic relation to Loki at all, then I would have no problems. But they never discussed that, they never established that, so as far as I'm concerned, she's a genetic sibling of Loki, and now he falls in love with her, which I guess maybe will fit his narcissism and all of that, that he would fall in love with his female self. Maybe that would fit this character in that sense, but it's just a nasty idea, so that's one big problem. And also they show that when Loki falls in love with her, suddenly it creates some other timeline which allows the time cops to detect where they are and to come and get them. But by coming there, they are actually the ones who save them. So if they were on a planet that is about to be destroyed, then what difference did it make if Loki fell in love with her or not? How could it have created a different timeline if they were about to be killed? Seconds later, the whole planet was about to explode, unless they were going to get rescued by someone else, but they never showed it. So how could a new timeline have been formed before the TVA even went there? And they wouldn't have went there unless the timeline was already forming, so it doesn't really make any sense. Why didn't the TVA just leave them there to be killed and that will solve all their problems? So why did they themselves rescue them and then not put enough guards on them and allow them to escape again? So none of that makes any sense. That makes the TVA look even stupider than they did before, and that's one of my complaints about the show. I'm fine with a lot of the silly comedy and all kinds of silly stuff, but there should be some limit if you want to take the show seriously and make it believable and exciting and would have actual stakes in it. Then you have to have some logic in it, and the way all of them behave as if with no brains, and the way the technicalities of all of it doesn't make sense, that annoys me. I'm called myself Nitpicking Nerd for a reason. It's because I like attention to detail, and when details, even little details, don't make sense, it kind of annoys me a little bit. It kind of destroys my suspension of disbelief when watching science fiction, and so I love to point out all kinds of things like that, as well as trying to make up excuses to explain them away. And this time I don't really have any explanation. Maybe they will explain it later somehow, but so far a lot of things just don't make any sense, and not necessarily technical things, even the way some characters behave, like when they put Loki into that time loop when he gets repeatedly kicked in the balls again and again. How come he doesn't try to defend himself the next time? Like it keeps happening like 10 times and he doesn't even try to defend himself from that. So I'm starting to think maybe he enjoys that he enjoys getting kicked in the balls all the time repeatedly, because he doesn't do anything to defend himself. So those kinds of little details annoy me, because if I was in that position, I would not behave in that way. So it's hard to connect with what's happening when constantly I'm wondering, why the hell is he not doing this or that? Why didn't he ask questions of his genetic sibling which he fell in love with to find out her exact background? He never asked. Why doesn't he try to defend himself from getting kicked in the balls? And what kind of silly joke was that she was annoyed at him because he cut a piece of her hair? And yet this is the adult version of that character. What's her name? Sif or something. She was in the Thor movies, and I think she was in one of the other Marvel TV shows, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or something. She appeared there. Like, she is like the cheap Asgardian who always appears for a cameo because they cannot afford any of the big stars, so all these minor characters show up in all these TV shows. So she shows up angry at Loki because he cut a piece of her hair, and yet it's the adult version of her. It's not her as a kid or something. So are you really telling me that that's what they were doing on Asgard? Like, Loki is the god of mischief because he was pulling all kinds of silly, childish pranks like that. He was cutting people's hair off to piss them off. Seriously. And a lot of this show is kind of focusing on, I guess, redeeming Loki, having him face all his past sins and mistakes and apologizing for them constantly. So the show is kind of humiliating his character, bringing him down, I guess, so that he'll redeem himself. But it's all done in such a silly way, and that's why it's kind of annoying. Like, really cutting a piece of her hair as an adult, and not even an adult. Technically, didn't they say they lived for thousands of years by this point? And so that's also something that annoyed me in the very first episode, when he was getting processed, and that guy put a pile of paper in front of him and said that's everything he ever said, and it was like the size of a big book. But I think even a normal person living today would have talked more than that pile of papers, and yet Loki is supposed to be thousands of years old, and he's still so childish, still cutting people's hair off as a joke. Like, I don't buy that. And so things like that, all kinds of little details like that, annoyed me. And on top of it, the show is kind of boring most of the time, and is not really that impressive. The only impressive part in this episode was toward the end, when they had that fight scene in that throne room of the timekeepers. That was kind of cool, even though we've seen such a scene a million times, like in Star Wars and stuff like that. But it's always fun to see. That's just nice visually to see a giant battle in a throne room of some kind of invincible emperor and all of that. That's just something I like, and so I did like that scene. And the reveal was also kind of fun. I guess this is spoilers, so if you still watch, don't complain. I predicted early on that the timekeepers will be revealed to be villains, and even in the start of this episode they kind of confirmed that right away. People are scared to come visit them, and they look kind of creepy, sitting on throne rooms and being all covered with fog and with red lights and all of that, so it looks evil and all of that. So it was pretty obvious from the start of the episode that they are the villains, and it was predictable. But they had an additional twist, that they're not actually real at all. They're actually robots. They cut one of their heads off and it's a robot. So they're not really in charge of anything. They're not real beings. They're not the actual villains. There is, I guess, some other villain who just pretended that these are the guys that are running this whole place, and it's actually all controlled by someone else, which they didn't reveal yet. And so I guess it's interesting. I guess it brings the mystery back. I guess it makes it less predictable and more exciting, and I'm glad they did this early on in the fourth episode and didn't drag it till the end. And so I did kind of like all of that stuff. And I also really like the character of Agent Mobius. He's probably my favorite character in the whole show. He's just a super charismatic, fun character. That's probably the best part of the whole show so far. And yet they apparently killed him during this episode, but it's obvious that all the people that they so-called vaporized are not really dead, but instead I guess they all get transported to some other place. We saw in the post-credit of this episode that Loki, who was also apparently vaporized, was actually sent to some place where all of these variants get sent to when they get so-called vaporized, and including maybe all the places that they vaporized, in the different timelines. Maybe all of that simply gets sent to one place to be locked away. Maybe some kind of other dimension, other place where all of that stuff, all of those variants will be sent together. And that makes me think the next episode will probably be the most interesting, because we'll probably see a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of different versions of the same characters and places, and it will be like a wasteland of all kinds of crazy stuff. And it will probably be revealed that Agent Mobius didn't really die, so that's a relief, I guess, because the moment that he so-called died, I thought, oh no, the show is over because that was the best character. But after we've seen that post-credit scene with Loki, it's obvious that none of them died, and then we'll see all of them again. Maybe each one is sent to his own pocket dimension or whatever, because Loki is apparently woken up by different versions of Loki, and so maybe each of them gets sent to a place where all the variants of the same character get sent to. So maybe Agent Mobius will see other variants of his character in a different place than Loki, and Loki will see the place that is full of Lokis, and so that I think will probably be the best episode, the funniest one, and so on. So that's my opinion. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss it in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.